I want to introduce our amazing panelists. So Madison, Ryan, and Christina, welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and knowledge and hopping on with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
excited to
thank
be
you
here.
so much for having us.
I was afraid to talk. I got scared.
Yeah, a little bit of hesitation there.
Perfect.
You're all like, who's going to talk first?
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, Christina, Ryan. I know you've been on a few of these, so you know the drill. But Madison, thank you so much for hopping on with us today and giving us some expertise here. Okay, so before we dive into the juice of the conversation, I do want to get a bit more background on each of you, so we can get a bit more acquainted with the audience and they can kind of get a bit more understanding of who you are. So Christina, I'll start with you. Do you mind just giving us a bit of breakdown on yourself so we can get a bit more acquainted?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Brady. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Sales Assembly. I come from a lot of years working in tech and executive leadership positions, most notably coming from Groupon, coming from Glassdoor. And right now, working at Sales Assembly, half of my job is focused on building out our product strategy, and the other half is focused on honing in on our executives and making sure that they have everything that they need to be successful. So been around for a little bit and excited that people still want to hear me say some things sometimes. So that's good.
No, totally. We're always going to want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You're a plethora of knowledge. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you giving us your time. And yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. I'll throw it over to Madison. Madison, do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself so we can get a bit more acquainted?
I don't mind at all. Everyone, I'm Madison. I've been working with mostly in sales roles for a long while now here at GetAccept. Primarily, I started in an SDR role, BDR role, account executive, solutions engineer, and now I'm a Salesforce Alliance Manager. So I'm still quota carrying, still do a lot of solutions engineering, but I'm really focusing on lead generation and building the alliance with one of our key partners, which is Salesforce, and then enabling reps to better sell to our Salesforce clients, and then working on some training and enablement projects also internally for the reps at Salesforce. So kind of a lot of stuff there, but definitely sales, which I enjoy very much. So
amazing. So you've been all across the sales situation. So this is going to be I'm excited to hear what you have to say with multiple different perspectives. This is going to be good. Okay, Ryan, last but not least, let's get a bit more background on yourself so we can get more acquainted.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm a chief evangelist at LeadIQ. My job is to help people with making selling, personalization, and interacting with buyers as easy as possible. I've trained a bunch of sales teams. I've done crazy stuff in marketing, and I haven't gotten a haircut in a long time. So you're looking at a guy that has not had a haircut. This is just this is intentional. But yeah, if you want to talk or shop about sales or prospecting or marketing, anything on the revenue function side, that's kind of my superpower. I try to know a lot about.
Hey man,
Awesome.
I love the hair. Looks great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is without a comb too. I'm in Boston today. I stayed overnight in Boston. I live in New Hampshire, and I didn't have a comb. So you guys are seeing it. This is the real look.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan, for joining us. I know all three of you are very busy, so we appreciate your time and hopping on with us. Okay, so now that we know each other, let's start this conversation. I think it's going to be super great. But I do want to start off with a question for the audience. Let us know what you guys think here. Okay, so are you currently working in office or at home? Let's hear what you got to say.
Yeah, in chat, right? You want them to say it in
Yeah,
chat?
let us throw it in the chat. Home. We got Michael.
Hybrid means that they work in a Toyota Prius.
Yes. both
Cool.
home. At home 100%. Yeah, so sweet. Well, we got everyone saying either home or hybrid. No one has said fully in office yet. So it looks like that's kind of where we're going, right? And that's the topic of what we're speaking to today. So awesome. Okay, so I want to start off with a talking point here that I want to address. So when you're looking at your sales strategies in these hybrid environments now, especially when there's, different processes for in-person, different processes for remote, and now that we're in hybrid, how do we kind of look at that? I'll start with you, Madison. How have you been able to determine with your teams, when it's necessary to apply, a process universally across, the whole team, or when it's appropriate to be a bit more flexible?
Are you referring to just the sales process in general?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when it should be universal or more flexible? Well, I think that where it needs to be universal is definitely when it comes to the tech and the data, because if all of these teams are trying to collaborate, or all of these people are trying to collaborate in a company across regions, it's really hard if they're using different systems. So for instance, if I'm working deals with solutions engineers, AERs, CSMs, we're all using different tools. It's really hard for us to have notes in the same place and key customer information. So I think that should be unified and universal. And then in terms of how to communicate with the customer, like communication style or methods, I think that is where we need to be a bit more flexible. Everyone regionally communicates differently. Time zones are different. I think that personalities are different. Even if we were all in the same place, we should just still be adapting to the person that's on the other end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Stemming a little bit off of how to think about stuff when you're working remote and trying to make everybody when to make something a process. I think one thing to kind of keep in mind too is we just saw a ton of employee turnover over the past year, right? We saw people with the Great Resignation, all that stuff. Process isn't just making rules and teaching people stuff. It's also like building a very usable interface when someone's doing selling on sales teams. Little fun nugget that I was talking about with these guys a couple weeks ago. If you're doing outbound prospecting is a good example. Yeah, usually most people on their sales team have younger people. This is going to make you feel really old if you're in this, but the average person that does outbound prospecting is 27 years old. 25 years old. They were born after 1997, which means that they were basically 7 years old when broadband internet connections became the most popular internet connection. They were 10 years old when smartphones launched, and they were 11 or 12 years old when you could literally watch any movie or TV show or piece of musical item. It wasn't any song in history on Spotify in one click. But when we moved to working from home, this generation of seller that was raised with the birthright of what I'd call instant gratification is they're not getting that with all these different things that we keep adding to the sales stack. And processes need to be in place for teaching people what to say, how to sell, how to think. And that's really important too. But it's also about putting them in a position to be successful with the way that they work through their day job every day operationally. And we need to make it as easy for someone to do things that they want to do in sales as it is to use one of these different applications they use in everyday life. Just something I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Christina, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm going to double tap on what both of them said. And if it's all right, there's kind of something that I think goes along with this in the Q&A, which I think ties really nicely to it. And it's this idea that there's an issue that we have that I look at as sort of a cultural morale issue of we have some folks who are coming in the office or have the ability to come into the office. We have other folks who working remotely or maybe don't feel safe coming into the office. And those folks who aren't going to be joining the office can feel that FOMO, right? Like everyone's meeting in the office, I'm not there. But the core fear they feel is this going to put me in a disadvantage in terms of my job or my career growth or my ability to connect to my coworkers? Am I somehow going to be seen as lower or lesser because I am not working in the office with everybody else? Am I going to look less committed, right? Like there's a lot of kind of cultural morale questions that come up with that as we're working in this sort of half hybrid, half non-hybrid environment. And the thing that I'll say is with a question like this, the answer is going to be yes and no. And let's start first with no. You need to make sure that you have a culture where folks' careers and ability to succeed in their role is not impacted based on where they sit, right? If I'm sitting at home or I'm sitting in the office, I should have the same resources, maybe delivered differently, but the same ability to hit my number and achieve my career aspirations as somebody who is sitting in the office. So on the flip side of that, there is going to be an element of FOMO, that element of like, am I at a disadvantage? Like culturally and qualitatively, you probably will be. Anybody who has ever worked remote will be. That's like saying, I don't want to go out to dinner with all of my friends, and I also don't want to feel FOMO. And it's like, well, unfortunately, if you're not going to be with the people who are doing the things, you're going to miss out on office conversations. You're going to miss out on some of that relationship building that is in person. Absolutely. And there's something to address there in terms of how do we help to lessen that impact? Because that's existed since before COVID, right?
Mhm.
Anytime I've managed remote teams, folks on the remote side have always felt disconnected from the home office, and that's never going to stop. So on the one hand, if it's stopping their careers and it's stopping their ability to advance, you got to fix that, right? That's poor leadership. If they're feeling disconnected, there'll always be an element of that. But one, address that, right? Address the fact like you're working remote, you're probably feeling really disconnected. We came into the office today. Here's what we did. And we'd love to get your tips or your ideas on that. If you have an entire team meeting in the office where everyone is coming together, call those people on FaceTime or get them on a Zoom and have them in the room. Like do what you can to leverage against that. But the reality is you're never going to have remote employees that feel as connected as people who have the ability to go in the office. We just do the best we can there, while on the flip side, making sure it never hurts them professionally.
I heard something really interesting that to build on. That's really smart, by the way, Christina. I heard something at a conference last October, like a executive retreat from an executive, and one of the things they were talking about is make that culture feel a little bit better with people that are remote. Actually figuring out ways to interact with people that are in that person's life too. Like if you think of the old days when we would all be at an office, you might go get drinks or do a happy hour on a Thursday at 4 p.m. or something. You would go tag along, and sometimes people would bring friends, they'd bring family, they'd bring a wife, significant other. That culture and that gap in culture actually makes it so that you're not getting that intimacy of understanding that person's life and who's around them. The other thing is if someone has a bad day on the sales floor and can't get meetings or like has a deal that they lost and they go complain to that person that they know or they're venting, they'd be like, well, maybe you should talk to X person about it because they know him. There's a whole support network around people that's outside of work, and we've lost that connection because of people moving remote. Figuring out a way to interject and pull in people from their life into stuff that's happening in the sales world can actually like help with like put on a social with someone's wife or significant other, or husband or partner or whatever it is.
Yep.
Find a way to get those people involved early on, and those people won't feel as left out.
Yeah. Yeah. The social aspect is a tricky one because everyone socially kind of wants to engage in different ways. I mean, we've tried to implement this quarterly meetup for our remote teams, and it's sometimes challenging to accommodate what everyone's idea of social activities are. So that's a challenge too. As far as the learning and development for remote folks, one thing that I've seen successful is creating ambassador programs of sorts. Like if we're trying to disseminate some new information, pick the most outgoing people who are excited to share the knowledge and impart the wisdom on those people first so that they're going to go and chit chat and assign them a buddy or give them tasks where they can engage with the people who are remote. And sometimes the remote people don't mind. They get to at least have some one-on-one connection with people who are more connected than they are in the office. So this ambassador program, it's been successful for us when we're rolling out new programs or trainings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. Examples are fantastic because I know there's so many ways that people have tried to, create that sense of culture for their sales teams, especially in a remote world, but it's, what is actually working. Ryan, is there anything that you could share that, has worked with at Lead IQ to kind of help build that culture in the remote hybrid world?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things that we do. I'm just feeding off of some of the stuff that Madison suggested. We're all remote, by the way, now. Like we don't have any office here. We've been remote for about 2 years now. And there was a lot of cool morale and things that we had when we had an office that we obviously got taken away. A couple things you can do with your sellers and people that are on the sales team is pair them up with people that do stuff. Do call blitzes with just one partner. Do prospecting blitzes with people. Well, rather, if we have a rep, we'll pair them up with another rep, and they'll literally hang on a Zoom, and one person will cold call, and then the other person will cold call, and they give each other feedback. And sure, you could do call intelligence and all that stuff too, but like, there's something different about being on a call with somebody and like bonding over that. And if you form those relationships at the company with individual employees, it can kind of replace some of that FOMO that we were talking about earlier. And I think that's kind of that's one thing we've done that's worked really well. So reps will literally tag team their prospecting together. Sometimes they'll do deal reviews together. If they're working on a deal that's in the pipe, they'll like go over, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. And then they'll do the same thing and pair up, and they can vent and strategize and come up with stuff together.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love that. Because like going back to what Christina was saying about, and even Ryan and Madison about the whole, going back to in person, and it's like, a lot of people were hired during COVID. So they've actually never, maybe as an SDR, might have been their first job at a university. They've never actually been in the kind of war zone, I guess you could say, like, or the war room where someone right beside you is talking on a call while you're on a call, right? So there's a lot of distractions and a lot of, differentiators from working remotely where there's nothing to distract you and you can be focused. However, I found when I was working in office, I learned a lot from listening, right? And just kind of understanding how maybe the AEs or the other SDRs are kind of performing there. So I found it's tougher to coach, obviously, in a remote world, because you got to sit down and listen to how the rep did, or you got to hop on their call. Whereas in office, you can be working, but then also listen, out of your peripherals, I guess you could say, to add feedback. So that was just my thought there. Christina, is there anything on that you've worked with in your worlds around kind of culture building that has been successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that it's going to be different now, and that's okay. I actually think that your culture should always be evolving. And culture should always be a hybrid between top down and bottom up, right? Culture is built together, and people want to feel like they're a part of that. And you want every employee to feel like they can align with elements of culture that feels really, really good to them and gives them purpose. Like, why am I getting out of bed every single day and spending time of my life that I will never get back? It's a non-renewable resource, my time, right? I'm going to spend my time doing this job at this company. The culture and the mission and the vision of the company is part of what makes that feel good, right? It's part of what makes that sacrifice feel really, really good. And so culture should always be changing and evolving. And I think this is a good opportunity to remind companies of that and remind people of that it's going to be different right now. I think it also made a lot of people question what culture actually is. Like, I remember interviewing 5-6 years ago, and I would ask people, like, what's your ideal work culture? And they'd always say things like, fun. Or I love when companies have like game rooms, or I love when I'm able to just pop up on the roof deck, and I love, flexible workspaces, and everything felt so tied to space. Mm-hmm. Whereas now we're forced to think about what is culture outside of where we work. It's who we are. It has to do with integrity. It has to do with your diversity. It has to do with the thought leadership. It has to do with your mission and your vision. It has to do with how you interact with each other. It has to do with how much you value your employees and make them feel valued and feel heard. Like, culture is the heart. And we're having to learn to separate culture from perks and benefits, right? Culture is free, and it should be free. Perks and benefits are something else, like cold brew and kombucha. Love it. You take that away from me, it's not a ding on culture, right? It's a perk and benefit that, like, I'm going to miss, maybe not going to have as much gut health, but like, culture should be there all the time. So I think we've been forced to redefine it and question if our culture is just rooted in perks and benefits.
Amen. That's a great point. I love that.
Yeah. I've found that, and I don't know if my company has strategically planned it this way, but what I've found is all of our personal passions and interests and missions in life align with the work that we're doing here at the company in some way. Like, customer success folks that are working with sales reps really enjoy, help teaching women how to be successful in sales. And so they find a way to actually implement that personal passion in their day-to-day work. And it's just kind of worked out that we've all found a niche at the company that also aligns with our personal passions. And so if that could be strategically planned, I think that it should, because it's working really well from what I've seen here.
There's kind of three layers of how people connect with each other, whether it's colleagues or connecting with customers, it could be anything. I kind of call it the three stages of conversation. So like conversation, stage one in the conversation is like small current event, small talk stuff. None of us really like small talk. Like, oh, how is the weather there? That's cool. Like, no one ever says, boy, I can't wait to do that. Stage two is more of common interest. What can you do to understand someone's common interest and what things do they care about? What are they passionate about? And stage three is, what are someone's fears? What are their vulnerabilities? What are their dreams and aspirations? The more people that you can get connecting and talking at that stage three level, the closer your team will be. It won't matter whether they're remote or not. And you have to, we all have them. Think about it. Think of the people that you have at your work right now. There's probably one or two people that you talk to a lot at work, and you might complain about stuff, or you might come up with solutions together. You might just have a laugh and get along with these people and find ways to do this. If you can create opportunities for people in your workspace, especially in sales, to identify what their common interests are, and then also get people and push them a little bit more to disclose some of their fears and aspirations and dreams and vulnerabilities, you'll build a better support network for people where they're more open and trusting with what's going on. And it's way harder to do that when you're not just sitting at a water cooler in an office. So make time for it. You don't necessarily need to have an agenda for some of the social stuff that you do. Maybe you just go around and say, hey, what do you guys want to do? What are your dreams? Get that stuff out there in front of everybody and get everyone to start connecting. And it's going to be a little less comfortable sometimes for introverted people. If that happens, what I'd recommend is like do some of that stuff in writing instead of over Zoom. You can like let everyone do an intro on that stuff. You occasionally remind people. If someone achieves a goal, make the goal publicly aware with everybody. Yeah. Like have everyone get in it together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so going off of what we're talking about here with perks and benefits and stuff like that, especially with what Christina was saying, got a question from the audience, from Eric, asking, is there any thoughts about differentiated perks and benefits relative to those going into the office? So what he's saying is like we try to make it up to people who aren't coming in and enjoying the office, and it played out differently than we expected. I'll throw it over to you, Christina, just to get your thoughts to start it off.
Oh man, I want to ask more questions. I'd be like, did
Please
it not?
do.
Did it play out differently bad or differently good?
I know. I wanted to know too. Tell us.
Like, was it great or was it like not so great?
I need to know.
What I will say with limited context, because I try to make a habit of not delving into something until I have all the details. I will say that if you take the approach of we want to make folks who work from home feel like they have the same perks and benefits as those coming into the office, you're automatically framing that your ability to work from home is putting you in a lesser position, and we have to make up for that. So by just framing it that way, you can accidentally introduce a little bit of head trash. And so instead, if you lay out the fact that working from home is an equal opportunity to be successful as working from the office, they're just different, and you roll them out as being completely different versus, look, the ideal is working in the office. You come into the office, you get all the perks and benefits. You get the free lunch, you get the cold brew, you get the work, you get all of that. You get the gym membership. If you work from home, what can we do? What can we do to make it feel just as good, right? You're automatically saying that by working remote, you are lesser. So I think a lot of this is in the communication. And a lot of it also is highlighting what are the perks and benefits of being able to work from home that you actually don't get in the office. You don't have to make the commute. You're already working from home. You probably have more time in between meetings to relax or take a break. That's not necessarily true of the last 2 years, because I think we can all agree that all of us have never been so back to back, even though we're working from home. But it's almost pointing out that like each of them have their perks and benefits, right? Keep it there. Perks and benefits of working from home, perks and benefits of coming into the office. Culture, same for everybody.
Yeah.
So without having more information on that, Eric, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's good. And we tried to do like a benefits package of sorts for remote versus people who are going into an office versus people who had a co-working space membership. And we just found that everyone wanted something different. Like my ideal work from home situation was totally different because I sometimes want to be in a co-working space and my colleague does not at all want to change out of her business on the top, casual on the bottom outfit. And so she wants to stay home. And so what we did was just like a stipend package every month. And everyone has categories of items that they can purchase, any kind of, health, wellness, etc. And we just decide how we allocate it. And that's been very successful.
One thing I was going to add, I'm not sure if it quite answers the question, but it made me think of this actually as an idea for people that are struggling with this. I think that you also have to start thinking about the experiences people are going through when your company's communicating stuff internally with everyone. For example, most companies do an all hands. A good all hands meeting shouldn't be doing a slide share and talking through initiatives at the company. A good all hands should be you getting a chance to almost run it like a town hall meeting sort of, and let people interact. One of the things that we did at Lead IQ very early in the pandemic that's helped a lot with communication and making people from home. We're all from home now, but like people that were remote before, we actually run our all hands like a late night talk show. So like we'll rotate through a guest at the company that's just a normal person. I've done a couple of them, but like we'll rotate through with that person. They open up with a monologue, usually with a couple jokes, maybe. They might have one of the employees to show off a talent that they have online, and then we jump into Q&A with different departments. And each of the departments that we interview and talk with, we do Q&A that would have been the information they show in the slides, but it's kind of like instead of talking about the movie, instead of like showing a trailer with the movie, they talk about the movie that they did and what it's about. So think of like creating a better experience for someone remote that is a little different than sitting around a stage in the old office when you all would just gather around in the same room. You want to make that experience a little bit more engaging, a little bit more entertaining, and make people feel like a little closer connection with the employees that work there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that format. Okay, amazing. This is great. We got some great stuff on culture. Okay, I want to move towards talking about kind of the tech stack with whether in person or remote or hybrid. I would love to know from each of you, the differentiating factors of kind of what tech you would use, say, in person. How do you modify it for the remote world or the hybrid? Is there anything that kind of like that you would give your reps that are when they're working in person within the tech stack, or is there something you take away? How have you been able to kind of strip it down to make it easiest for your reps, whether they're working remote or whether they're working in person or hybrid? Madison, I'll start with you.
Okay, so we've not had like many tech stack changes. Even when we were all in an office, we still took all of our meetings from Zoom, even though we were in San Francisco in the hub of where all of our clients were and events. We still took our day-to-day meetings from Zoom, except for internal meetings. So in all honesty, the tech stack hasn't changed, but how we use it has. Mm-hmm. We use it more often, I will say, all of the tech, and also the data integrity component has been a lot more important because I think I mentioned earlier when I'm working with an SDR and an AE and an SE and a partner manager and an external party, how I transfer, save, and disperse all of the data is very, very important because I can't just reach over and tap the person to my left to share some information. So that's been a change. And then the other thing is with time zone differences, video recordings, audio recordings, screen recordings, things of that sort, I use them way more because if I can't do a phone call, it's much more personal and it's much quicker for me to just do a quick 1-minute video recording and send that over instead of trying to write out in a long email my message. So those are two really big differences and just how we've adapted using the tech more and different. But remote versus in person, tech stack is the same from my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally agree with the whole, the video piece, like whether it's prospecting or even internal messages, right? It's just get on there, get your point across, send it out, and then that's it. But
Yeah.
I love that. Um,
Yeah, building off of that a little bit, just to add something here. I think one way that we approach it and think about it is kind of treating it like you guys know, like UX people, like user interface, user experience people that build products.
mm,
You want to do the same operationalization with simplifying how you do stuff in the sales world. So if it's like sending a contract, adding setting up a meeting, putting someone into a sequence, go down the list of all this stuff. You want to make it as few steps as possible, because when you work from home, it's super, super easy to get distracted. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I check my fantasy football team like 6 times a day, like throughout the fall, and I should not be doing that. Don't tell Lead IQ, please. I see you all. No, stop. Don't do that. But anyway, easy to get distracted when you work through the day, interruptions at home. So the faster that you can get a task that produces output done, the more productivity you'll get out of somebody. So I think you want to try and strip it down to be as easy as possible. There's a lot of reasons for this that we can go into, but like a good way of breaking it down a little bit is like you basically have a window of 18 months for a sales rep to be productive at your company, and you want to maximize those 18 months as easy as possible.
mm-hmm.
So like, if you add stuff to the sales stack, figure out a way to make it so everything's only 1 or 2 steps to do anything, so it doesn't complicate stuff. And there's ways to do it. You can like connect a bunch of apps. You could get rid of some stuff that creates bottlenecks, but like think through that process when you're actually choosing what to put in your tech stack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And on that same kind of what I was saying about data loss, every tool that we use, it's just another area of risk of losing important data. Like this customer life cycle management is a conversation or a topic I hear a lot. And it's like, how do we use the data and the intelligence that the SDRs gain to enable the AE, to enable the SE, to enable the CSM so they can retain the client, and so we can improve marketing in the end. And every single tool we have, when we're separating all of this data, it just makes it harder to aggregate the insights and improve as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing that I'll add to this is there's tool equity, which is what we were talking about, which I agree with both Madison and Ryan, where it's like that needs to be, everyone should have access to the same tools. But then there's human equity, which is the ability to get the help of the human beings around you. That often that's where remote employees feel like they lose out, is I don't have the ability to go tap on someone in sales ops and help them push my deal through CPQ. I don't have the ability to go over to my deals desk and sit down with them and talk about the right way to structure my deal, because you're not in the office and I might be slacking you or chattering you and I'm not getting an answer because I'm remote. And so I think it's less about tool equity, because we see that a lot, right? You're not going to give some sellers tools and other sellers not tools. But at the same time, if there are advantages that folks have for being in office in terms of human equity and support doing their day to day, it's thinking through what might those be and what is the resource and the ease of access that remote employees would have to those same types of things, and sort of building those bridges.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feed off that for a second. I'll give you a really cool story that I heard. You guys know Zoom. We're literally on Zoom right now, right? Zoom.
Yes. I have no idea what Zoom is.
What is Zoom? I've never heard of them. I did a webinar last year with someone from Zoom, and I talked about remote stuff with them. And I remember the person that I had on mentioned that they are really careful to make sure that every week the sales team gets to meet with the different executive from a different department, and they rotate through them. And by the time they get through the 6 or 7 departments that Zoom has, you're hearing fresh stuff again from that person. The other thing that they do is they make the executives available to hop in on a deal and help with a call. Literally every week, they have to do one sales call with the sales rep to help push a deal through. We took this advice and it helped us yesterday here. We had a deal that had been sitting in pipe for about 30 days. And we realized that the CRO that we were working with actually knew our chief operating officer really well. And we're like, yo, could you help us with this? He just sent the person a text and we hopped in a meeting and the deal closed yesterday. And it had been sitting in pipe for 30 days. So find different ways to grab that human element that Madison was talking about, and actually put it to paper. Make it a requirement of the executives. Hey, do help out with something that's going pipe becomes needed, and that person will feel like they're getting the support they need.
Mhm. No, that's a great point too. And like, yeah, like you said, like utilizing the rest of your organization to help, drive it, right? Like that's what I always said. When I kind of, just on a much smaller note, when I first came on as an SDR, I utilized all the seniors and, AEs and stuff like that to learn and get better, and then also help me with introductions and so on. So, um, no, that's a great point. Going off of that, I've got another question from the audience here from Eric, and he wants to know again, what are some of the best practices around platforms like Slack, HipBob, and others to drive engagement and collaboration and so on. He says we've suffered channel explosion and are paring back in hopes of being more inclusive. What are your thoughts there? I'll start with Ryan. Go.
Yeah, so one thing that we did that was really unique is back when we were in the office, we would have Slack channels that we would use basically for each department. We made private channels for each of the smaller teams. Instead of having a bunch of DMs you have to iron through and figure stuff out. And the private channels are literally direct teammates. No one else is in it. It made a huge difference in our productivity because we used to go put stuff like, for example, in the marketing channel, and the entire company would see what was going on with marketing. And they didn't need to see like, oh, what should I do with this stuff? And that stuff used to happen offline when we'd have those conversations. So now that they're happening in that's my tip, is to focus on that. The other thing I'd recommend is whenever you do channels for a specific trigger event or something that's going on, archive the channel when you're done. Like don't keep it open. That's where it gets really complicated. I feel like a lot of people will set these things up and then forget about them. And then they have 30 channels that they belong to. And someone will pop back in and add something. You're like, oh crap, I don't check that channel anymore.
Yeah, good tip.
I agree. I feel like my Slack is filled with channels that are just there that I'm like, what is going on here? Why am I still using them? Christina, do you have any thoughts? Or Madison?
I'm going to double tap on what Ryan said. And then also, it's never a bad exercise to ask yourself, should this be in Slack or should this be a phone call to that person? I think a lot of times you'll wind up accidentally falling into like coaching conversations in Slack, or you'll fall into something where you're not really sure of each other's tone because everybody reads messages in their own communication patterns, and there can be a lot of like misunderstandings or things that are too brief. So ask yourself if this should be a Slack or if this should be something that feels a bit more personalized. Especially if you are a leader, be careful about giving your teams feedback, especially if it's personal or constructive in a setting like Slack. It might feel too casual. They may miss it or they might misinterpret it. So just be careful with those kinds of channels.
I just want to add and double down. Did everyone hear the words that Christina said? She said phone call. You guys won't believe how amazing doing a phone call is instead of Zoom and instead of doing stuff on Slack. Yeah. I love phone calls. I'll just call somebody really quick and we'll chat on the phone for a couple minutes. Sometimes I'll catch them walking their dog and we can talk for 5 minutes. It's relaxing. It's so nice to not be in front of a desk and talk to somebody. Do the phone call. What a great idea.
Walk and talks.
Isn't it crazy that it's like a phone call's a revolution? Like, oh my God, a phone call?
What's that?
What? Right? But like,
yeah, it's funny. I get an email being like, hey, can you give me a ring? And it's like, wait, we're not getting a meeting going? Okay, sweet. Let's do this,
I know there's this conversation about like, stop calling. Nobody answers anymore. I'm in favor of, as Savannah mentioned, bring phone calls back. Let's just start answering the phone again, because the amount of screen time necessary to type a text or a Slack message is just exhausting for the eyes and the brain. Just do this. So much easier.
Everything can be accomplished so quickly, right? It's like, hey, 2 questions. All right, done. See you later.
If you're international, I saw Mark mention that too. And actually, Madison, you're international right now, technically, right? Aren't you? Right?
Yeah, I'm in Sweden actually right now.
How cool is that? That's so cool. I was going to say, if you're international, some other tips too. Some people can set up stuff. You can set up Signal. You could do Slack calling. I find the quality on Slack calls to not be very great on your phone, but we'll do Signal. Sometimes we'll make a departmental Discord, like, and just do voice chat on that, and then hook up headphones and walk around outside and use data. But those are some workarounds too if you're international.
Yeah, international is a tricky thing. I'm really figuring out as I go. But WhatsApp, and if anyone has an iPhone, I mean, FaceTime audio or FaceTime has been really helpful with my teammates and even people back in the States. So, yeah, but working across time zones is another challenge in itself. So,
oh yeah, and the time zone thing Christina just brought up in chat is like that's totally right. Like we have, I mean, we have people in I think 10 different time zones here. It's crazy.
So
yeah.
I want to piggyback off of that. Before we move on to our next topic, because I know we only have 15 minutes left, but I just wanted to kind of get an idea of from all of you guys, especially talking across geography, like geos and different cultures that are now working within the companies. Going back to our cultural conversation, how have you been able to achieve that with many people in different geographies, different time zones, different cultures, and how they operate and how they work to align with the other teams in the business? Is there any kind of tips and tricks or any things that you guys have done to kind of work with this? Madison, I'll start with you since you are international right now.
Yeah. So in terms of like culture across time zones, it's tricky because, we can't really help the fact that every region is going to have its own culture, and trying to change a region, like for instance, we have an office in France, Sweden, Denmark, USA, everyone's remote. Even the two offices in Sweden are very different. And there's this conversation about how different they are. And it's almost like they need to somehow find a way to be similar and to have the same culture. But what we found is that you can't really do that. Like the French office is going to be inherently different than the Sweden office. So it's really just about recognizing the way that they're different and letting them just be different and finding some pillars and some values that we can align on. So we have these core company values. There's 5 of them. And in everything that we do, in all of the stand-ups and all of the activities, the bonding, the onboardings, the decks that we have, the swag, those 5 core values are reflected everywhere. And so we may speak different languages and have different lifestyles or working habits, but we're all aligned on these 5 pillars and values. And so that creates this common denominator that we can bond over. And then we get to know each other with time through these socialization events and trainings. And eventually we are in some way connected and can work together seamlessly. So it's tricky. You want to just allow people to be different and make room for some flexibility, I think.
Yeah. I think that's it. I want to double down on that point about having just the key pillars that everyone can align with, and then from there accepting the differences. But as long as we have like some kind of common denominator, then we're in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
One thing we did that was really cool when COVID first hit, we actually cooled off on doing this. I think it kind of just got forgotten about, but we did something the first couple of months where you would do 15 minutes a week with a random employee. And sometimes it'd be at night, sometimes it'd be in the morning, but you just ask someone to talk for 15 minutes. We called it coffee time, except some of the team that we meet with would like be in Singapore. So it'd be like 9 a.m. my time or 9 p.m. my time. So I wouldn't do coffee then, but yeah, get tea time, maybe caffeine-free tea time. But we would have conversations with people. I had so many cool conversations with people, and you weren't allowed to talk about work in the conversation. Like I talked to someone on our team that like was in a Soviet satellite nation when the Soviet Union collapsed. And we literally talked about that for like 15 minutes. It was just so fascinating talking about that. And I don't even know how that came up, but like I have like a whole book of like 50 or 20 different like 50 or 60 different employees that I talked to over the course of last year and the year before, where I collected stories from these people. And now I see them in meetings on projects, and we have something in common because we formed that relationship.
Yeah. Sweet. These traditions of sorts are important. There's a Swedish tradition, or it's more just like a lifestyle in Sweden. It's called fika, and it basically means like tea time. They do afternoon fika, and there's these like pastries that they eat, and generally they have a coffee. And so no matter where you're from, even if you're from France or the US, this idea of having a Friday fika has been introduced. And so we all every Friday at 3 have a fika hour where we have refreshments and chit chat, and we all get to experience the Swedish fika, but we again adapted in our own way and unify over that.
Mhm. Yeah, and going Ryan, what you mentioned earlier, we did something called coffee roulette, where you just you wasn't allowed to be with your team. It had to be with a completely different department. And then, every Friday it would be coffee roulette. You take each other out for coffee and learn some more about each other. But that was back when we were in person. So, no, I love that. That's great. Cool. Okay. So we talked a lot about culture. We talked about tech stack. I want to kind of now talk about kind of like the sales process in a way, in some way, shape, or form. So, Madison, I'm going to throw this one over to you. As you've been in multiple different roles as, an individual contributor, and then also working, in office, fully remote, to now some of that hybrid international role. What are some tips you might have for our audience that you could give in maintaining oversight and control over all the deals that you were working?
Yeah. I've learned a lot about, time management is a thing, but timeline management is now a newer thing for me. And it's essentially just planning more steps ahead. Beyond planning how I time block my days and my weeks, it's thinking about in my deals, like how can I be extremely transparent with my client about the fact that I'm in a different time zone, and that if they have this go live date in mind, we need to set some benchmarks. And how can I plan this in advance by putting meetings in the calendar and creating clear calls to actions that we stay on time. So that idea of timeline management has been prominent across all of my deals. Also, of course, as I mentioned, like scheduling time blocks and things of that sort. And then I'm sorry, I'm just noticing my Wi-Fi is, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
You're good.
yeah.
Okay. And then timing. The cool thing about being in a different time zone is that I get to very strategically time when I send my responses. So the sales tools that I use give me the option to schedule my send outs or my emails. I'm sure many people have that. And so I know that prospects or my recipients, my potential clients, open emails and respond when I send it best. Not right in the morning when everyone sends all their emails and they're doing stand-ups, but like right before, right after the lunch hour. And so I can schedule things very strategically at that time. And I use a lot more screen and video recordings to catch up with leads and prospects because I know that the meeting time is limited. And also when collaborating with internal teammates, I take really, really, really good notes, and I make sure they're everywhere. So if someone needs to help with a deal, they have all of the data that's in my head that they might need. So, those are just a few prominent things I focused a lot more on. And the idea of, again, that, preventing data loss and making sure that the way that I sync with my SDRs, my AEs, and my partner managers is scheduled, planned, and also very scheduled, planned, and just documented very well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Christina or Ryan, do you guys have any thoughts on, how you've been able to work with your teams to kind of make sure that they're overseeing their deals when working remote, hybrid, and kind of multiple different time zones and stuff?
Do you want to go first or you want me to?
Ryan, you go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that we do is when we have a really key deal, we get like an all hands on deck meeting for people that can contribute with it. The other thing that makes things really useful is having a mutual action plan, which I'm sure a lot of you probably like, oh, I already have mutual action plans. You're a nerd, Ryan, and I get it, but it's cool. Mutual action plans are really great. What you do is you basically set up a list of how to navigate through a deal. And on your first or second call that you do with a prospect after discovery, you go through the mutual action plan with them. You find out what stakeholders you should pull in on stuff. And what you do is you also offer your team to that person as part of the mutual action plan. When you do that stuff, you set deadlines for it. And the cool part is when you're checking in with the person that you have a deal with and you haven't gotten it to a certain stage in your mutual action plan, you basically set a goal with them like, hey, we want this date to either decide whether to do this or not. No big deal if we don't, but you can work through that stuff. you pull in different stakeholders from your company.
Mhm.
It becomes a lot easier for you to stay on top. The other cool part is when you do a mutual action plan, you get the other team members on your team aligned with your goal of closing that deal and getting it out of your pipeline. If you're not doing a mutual action plan, I highly recommend that you read up about it. Actually, Outreach has a great write up about it. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. I think it was David Weiss, but he had a really great write up about it on mutual action plans. He does a great talk on it. You should definitely look it up.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. I love the idea of mutual action points, because some reps could be working multiple deals, right? And then some things could fall through the cracks, and having multiple people involved can kind
Mhm.
of make sure that everything's running smoothly again, right?
Yeah. Keeps everything in one place too. Like if the customer says this is our go live date and they inform the AE of that 6 months ago, and then the AE leaves or is unavailable or someone else joins, it's like all of that data is in one place. It's shared. It's mutual.
It
Mhm.
takes a village to close the deal.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially a, you know, 6-7 figure deal, right? There's multiple people involved, multi-threading the whole situation, right? So,
Mhm.
Christine, is there anything else you want to add, or is that kind of bang on? Cool.
Right.
Okay, guys. Well, I want to give you guys 5 minutes back so you can, get ready for your next meeting right at the top of the hour. But I want to thank the three of you so much for hopping on, giving us an hour of your time. I know you're all very, very busy people. And Madison hopping on, I'm sure it's probably pretty late for you, right? So thank you for hopping on from Sweden. Also, Get Accept. Thank you so much for sponsoring this event. They're doing some fantastic stuff. Go check them out. Also, you guys will be receiving the 2022 Leadership Playbook from Get Accept. Look out for it after the webinar today. It'll show up in your inbox probably shortly. So look out for that. But again, if there's any questions that we didn't get to, go follow Madison, Ryan, and Christina on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer anything that you guys have that we didn't get to. But again, thank you three so much. It's been such a blast. I learned so much. And honestly, I can't wait to do it again soon.